The most important missions and tasks in the world use them. Our lives are frequently in the hands of those people that use them. But if I was to tell you that you actually needed one of them, you might go, forget about it. But at the same time, once you learn about the tool that I'm going to walk you through, you wouldn't, or you really shouldn't, trust a human for a critical task without one of them. Because in this video, we are going to look at a very important tool and see how we can apply this to our PI planning event. Hey friends, I'm Ahmed, a skilled Agile and productivity coach based in the UK. On this channel, we cover productivity, agility, and joy. This is the 10th video in the PI Planning for Beginners series, where I cover step by step everything you need to know to run an amazing PI planning event. So what if I did tell you that there was a tool that was so simple, it literally cost pennies, it was easily accessible to all of us and could result in the difference between success and failure? Not just that, but actually life and even death in certain circumstances. Something as simple, and when I tell you, you're probably going to go, really? But it's something as simple as a piece of paper with some checkboxes that need to be ticked off has become one of the most important tools used in some of the most complex and mission critical situations around the world.
And it's on this timeline that we have all our procedures. We obviously have to hold these in place in 0G, so we make use of the Velcro and on the table.
This is being used by astronauts, surgeons, and pilots to huge success. Let me introduce you to Atul Gawande. When the World Health Organization came to him and his team and asked him to help on a project to reduce the number of deaths in surgery, after looking at different options, the solution that he came up with, 19-item checklist that took 2 minutes per surgical team. What was the result? Complications fell by 35% in every hospital and death rates fell by 47%. That something as simple as a checklist can have such a huge impact is astonishing. In fact, it was so successful that he wrote a book about it, The Checklist Manifesto. In this book, he talks about how something as simple as writing down a simple list of things that need to be performed in the right order and have agreement around it has radically shifted multiple industries. When we look at the NHS in 2018 to 2019, pre-COVID, they had something that they call, I can't believe they even have a name for it, called never events. They had 621 never events. They're blunders that are so serious that they should never have occurred in the first place. So there are things like operating on wrong body parts, right? Leaving surgical tools in patients. 2 patients mistakenly circumcised. I shouldn't laugh because it's like serious stuff. And if a checklist has been properly developed and is being properly used, it can help prevent these and other similar and avoidable mistakes. On the 15th of January 2009, a US Airways flight took off from an airport in New York City. Shortly after the plane took off, it flew into a flock of geese, and both engines were severely damaged, resulting in a complete engine failure. Let's have a look and see what the first thing that the pilot and the co-pilot actually do, as we can see in this clip. So the first thing he does is that he actually consults a checklist to consider what his options actually are. Now, if we look at 2 of the most critical industries that have adopted and enforced the use of checklists, is 1, the aviation industry. And they've done it to such success that the odds of being killed in a single aeroplane flight are 1 in 29.4 million. Imagine flying through the air, something inherently dangerous, when we've got this thing called gravity, right, has been reduced to 1 in 29.4 million odds of being killed. Now, I'm not pretending that, or I'm not saying that checklists are the sole reason why we have such an amazing record, but they play a critical factor in making sure and eliminating a large number of the common human errors that could likely take place. If we look in the construction industry as well, uses of checklists and the foundations and structural setup and builds have resulted in only 1 in 50,000 structures partially or entirely collapsing. So again, a very good result over there. Well, that's okay, because you may say, well, Ahmed, that's all very nice, but I'm not doing brain surgery and I'm not flying a plane. Well, that may be true, but the problem is that when we use a checklist, it relieves our mind of trying to remember things. And the truth of the matter is, the uncomfortable truth is, we are flawed decision makers and we have unreliable memories, and our minds are a bad place to try to continuously store information and continuously retrieve that same information regularly. 4 generations after the first aviation checklists have come out, a lesson is emerging, and that is simply they help catch mental flaws in all of us, be those memory, be that attention, or be that thoroughness. So now I strongly recommend that you don't trust your life to a surgeon that doesn't use one, or a pilot that doesn't use one. Get a different surgeon, get another plane. Now, equally, you also don't want to trust yourself with the critical parts and the critical functions that you need to do. When we're trying to implement checklists into an organization, frequently what I see is there can be resistance to that, where people think, hey, I'm a professional, I don't need a checklist, I don't need a to-do list, stop treating me like a child. But as we can see, all of us are prone to common mistakes and common errors, and making sure that we can try and explain that the difference between having a checklist can be that of us making silly mistakes that require constant correction, and take us from that place to a place of high quality work as well. So it gives us an opportunity for us to verify our work. We want to take a shift in our mindset. One, from making a checklist make us look like we're amateurs, to the real recognition to saying a checklist is a mark of a true professional, somebody that has got their game together, that wants to build consistency, that wants to build repeatability, and that wants to avoid common errors as well. So you may say, okay, that's all very good. How do we go about creating an effective checklist, and what has this got to do with PI planning? So let's pick off the first point first, right? How do we create an effective checklist? So Daniel Borman has come up with a 4-step system to actually help us to create an effective checklist. So let's go through those together. So the first thing that we have over here is that each checklist that we have should have what we call pause points, okay? So our pause points are the points where we may want to stop and check that we have got all of the things in place before we commit ourselves to a decision. So an example may be if you're a surgeon, before the first incision, if you're a pilot, before takeoff, and if you're doing PI planning, for example, and you're preparing for PI planning before you send the first invites for your PI planning event that's taking place, you might want to have a pause point over there to make sure you've got certain things in place. The next thing we want to have is we want to make sure that our checklist is not a manual. It is something that needs to be speedy. It is something that needs to cover off what we're calling the 5 to 9 killer items, the most important elements that are needed for us to achieve a specific objective as well. The next one is that it needs to be, again, a pointer to current knowledge, a reminder of things that we might need. They can be really simple, like, for example, checking a patient for allergies or checking whether a feature has been defined correctly. It could be very simple things, but it doesn't need to explain exactly how to do those things. And finally, and very importantly, is it needs to be field tested. So anything that we come up with, we need to be able to test it in our field, and then we need to update it. Now, in our PI planning event, or in our program increment, or in our scaled agile program, we have so many different events that at the team level, like the at the team level, like the retrospective, at the program level, like the inspect and adapt, where we can actually review and see whether we have got appropriate checklists or whether any errors have been introduced as a result of that as well. So making sure that we keep our checklists up to date is very important. So let's have a look now and see, so how do we take this powerful concept and apply this in our world, in a scaled agile world, in our PI planning event. First place where we can use a checklist is basically when it comes to PI planning, especially, is in what I find is defining our feature readiness. How ready are our features? One of the key issues that most organizations and programs, when they're starting off using scaled agile, is one of the challenges they actually have is in getting the features organized and getting them in a really great. And so to have a checklist that covers off our feature readiness, which I call, or was frequently referred to as a definition of feature readiness, is something that can go a long way. The next thing that you might want to consider a checklist for is for your PI planning preparation. All of the steps of things that you need to do to make sure that you are ready for your PI planning event. And the PI planning event itself may have checklists, and you may have, for example, certain events that lead themselves very well to checklists. Example of that is a Scrum of Scrums during the planning events, when you've got the team planning, or have the teams achieved a certain status across all of the entire agile release train. And also for your wrap up, frequently I'm finding that there's so much effort that goes into the PI planning event, and then by the time it's done, everybody's like, oh, thank God that's done, right? But then things get missed off. The translation between where you were working, if it's not in your main tool, and the transference of that information and the shutdown of that event in an orderly way, which can happen post-event, it needs to happen and take place effectively and efficiently as well. All of these things help us to have consistency. We are therefore not reliant on making sure that everybody has exactly the same level of understanding and the same level of awareness, which is impossible for us as human beings. It helps to build consistency. It helps to improve the quality and the speed as well. So let's have a look at an example of a definition of feature readiness that you can see on the screen as well. Now, the important thing is that the teams come up with the definition of feature readiness for the agile release train. And so effectively what you have over there, you have a consensus in terms of what are some of your key pain points, and also what are the key things that you think are really important. On my screen, I've given you an example of something that I find typical that could be useful. Have your features been defined correctly? Are the benefits for your features obvious? And can we measure them? And have they been sized, etc., etc.? So all of these different elements could form part of your feature readiness checklist. But again, it's something that you should do as part of your program. So I encourage all of the programs that I work with directly to have this in place. I help support them to put that in place, and I encourage you to do that as well with your programs. Are you likely to receive some resistance? Yeah, you might do. Some of it may be overt in terms of saying, hey, stop treating us like a kid, we don't need a checklist, blah, 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 that, in which case you might want to show them this video. Or it may be covert, i.e. they just don't use it. Either way, I encourage you to try to introduce this into your Agile release training, your Agile program, and over time, get them to actually adopt this as well as a best practice as well. And be patient with them whilst you explain to them why it's so important for them to use these checklists. Okay, so I hope you find that useful. In the next video, we're going to be looking at putting together a roadmap, why it's a good idea to have one prior to PI planning. Till I see you next time, love learning, keep growing, and most importantly, don't forget to bring the joy. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.